Okay, the time has struck, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone from all over Asia and Europe who's joined us here today for our final workshop on Malaysia, focusing in on the role of businesses in the Malaysian science and technology diplomacy ecosystem. This workshop series is part of our country-focused workshop series on navigating science and technology diplomacy ecosystems. And this one on Malaysia is specifically organized in partnership with the International Institute for Science, Diplomacy and Sustainability at the UCSI University and the Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Technology, or MITE. So my name is Linnea Regnell, and I'm one of the project executives here in the Education Department in ASEF. At the Asia Europe Foundation, and I have the pleasure of guiding you through today's third and final session here, focusing on Malaysia. Before we kick off, allow me to just go through a bit of the agenda for today, as we have about 2 hours ahead of us to focus in on businesses today. I will begin with setting a short introduction to the initiative here at ASEF before handing over to Mr. Sakwan for his introductory lecture. And this will be followed then by a panel discussion and a Q&A with our speakers who are ready to share their insights and knowledge with you, specifically on the role of businesses and the private sector in the intersection between science, innovation, technology, policy, and diplomacy. For the purpose of this session and for the Q&A, you will all have the opportunity to share your thoughts, but also ask specific questions using the Q&A function that you can find on your screen in the Zoom panel. You can post your questions, you can upvote any that you find interesting, and you can also reply and engage with other participants as well. So you can ask these questions throughout the whole session. So during the presentation by Mr. Sakwan Savidi, and then also during our panel discussion itself. With that, allow me to go into a quick introduction on this initiative and kind of setting the scene and context for this workshop that you're joining today. So, as many of you may know already, ASEF, or the Asia Europe Foundation, is an intergovernmental organization, and we work specifically on strengthening mutual understanding between Asia and Europe across different sectors. And across different thematic areas, we do so by bringing together governmental, civil society stakeholders, and in between, to strengthen the connectivity and to build opportunities for collaboration, all with the aim of solving global challenges between the regions and contributing to the sustainable development goals. And recently, we have focused on furthering this goal by engaging in the field of science and technology diplomacy. And we started out in 2024 by conducting a mapping exercise of the science and technology diplomacy strategies that are present in Asian and European countries. And we produced a report from this that gives the overview of these findings. And following the report last year, we now, as you know by this workshop series, wish to give the highlights. We wish to highlight and give the spotlight to a number of countries who we believe are actively contributing to this field in science and technology diplomacy, and to help stakeholders across both Asia and Europe to see how the ecosystem in that country works and how they can collaborate with these different stakeholders. So looking at 3 aspects here, we have focused in on the government role, academia and private sector, and now we're here today for the third and final session on Malaysia, looking at the private sector. And we're looking through these 3 different lenses in upcoming workshop series as well on other countries. But with that introduction, I would like to go into our first segment of today's workshop, focusing in on businesses in Malaysia's science and technology diplomacy ecosystem. And we'll do so by an introductory lecture. So at this point, I would like to introduce our lecturer for today and presenter, Mr. Sakwan Savidi, who will deliver this presentation. Thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Sakwan is a Senior Vice President of the Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Technology, or MITE, as I introduced previously as well. He's also an adjunct professor at the International Institute of Science, Diplomacy and Sustainability at the UCSI University. And beyond that, also an elite fellow for University Malaya. He brings together the consolidated skills and knowledge acquired over 27 years of different management roles and involved on a wide range of programs and initiatives, which includes the national blueprints and roadmaps, innovation model and framework, policy and strategy development, foresight and technology audit, business strategy development, and of course, science diplomacy. He was previously seconded to the Office of the Science Advisor, Prime Minister's Office, where he served as the special advisor to the Science Advisor to the Prime Minister of Malaysia. And during his decade at this office, he was involved with science diplomacy and science advice to the government initiatives, which includes the Commonwealth Chief Science Advisor, the APEC Chief Science Advisor, the Foreign Ministry Science and Technology Advisors Network, the International Network for Governmental Science Advice, INSA. So a very big plethora of different institutions and organizations there. He holds an advanced diploma in business administration, majoring in transport from Mara Institute of Technology, and also undertook further studies in MBA at University of Salford in the UK. Currently, he is also a corporate member of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport in the United Kingdom. And with that vast knowledge, he is here to give us an overview and introduction to the role of private sector and businesses in Malaysia. So, Mr. Sakwan, the floor is yours. We're ready for your presentation.
All right, thank you, Linia. Hello, good morning. Good morning, everybody in Europe, and also good afternoon for everybody in Asia. First of all, thank you very much. Thank you for our ASEAN Europe Foundation for giving me this opportunity. My name is Zakwan. I am the Senior Vice President for Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Technology. In short, that we call MITE. MITE is basically a public-private partnership that drives high technology industry through strategic consultations, advisory, and also implementation. What we do basically, we conduct market intelligence in terms of technology foresight and road mapping and policy intervention across a wide range of industries and also technologies. I will explain a more detail about MITE and what we do in terms of science delivery at the end of my presentation. Before I go to my presentation, it's basically I want just in terms of the agenda. Basically, I will be discussing more in terms of three categories. First one is the evolving context of science diplomacy, the role of the non-state actors, particularly the business sectors, and how might operationalize the science diplomacy. So before I go into my topic, let me just recap a little bit about the typology of science diplomacy. In our previous lecture by Prof. Zakri and also Professor Muhammad, he had mentioned about science in diplomacy, diplomacy for science, and science for diplomacy. So in terms of, because of the evolving context of science diplomacy, there's one more element that is being included in the latest report by the European Framework for Science Diplomacy, which is diplomacy in science. Just to recap, the science in diplomacy is basically in terms of informing foreign security policy objective with scientific advice. For example, like in terms of, for example, like the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. For diplomacy in science is basically facilitating international science cooperation by diplomatic action. For example, the international agreements such as decision by the US and Russia in 1993, and also the establishment of the International Space Station. And on the science for diplomacy is using science cooperation to improve relation between countries, such as using personal scientific networks to build trust when states refuse to engage formal relations, or using international research infrastructure for trust building or as a vehicle for informal talks. So basically, the new element is the diplomacy in science, whereby using diplomatic skills and tools in and also by science. It's also refers to as a knowledge diplomacy. Diplomacy in science basically refers to using international, for example, like using international higher education and research initiatives to strengthen relationships between countries and also address global challenges. So just before I begin further, let me just give some interaction in terms of the interaction between science and diplomacy, because scientists and also diplomats, they have a different focus in terms of skills, role, and also they are trained differently. For example, like scientists, the focus is more on conducting research, investigating phenomena, and also expanding human knowledge. And the skills are different, different from a diplomat, because the scientist skill is more in terms of analytical thinking, scientific methodology, expertise in specific field of science, and the ability to communicate scientific findings effectively. And the role of scientists is totally different from a diplomat, which is a scientist's role is to involve working in research institutions, universities, or government agencies, and contributing to scientific advancement. Whereby the diplomat, the focus is more on representing their country or organization in international relations, negotiating treaties, building relationship, and also promoting the nation's interests. And the skills for scientists and diplomat is also different, because they train differently. And the skill for diplomat is more in terms of strong communication, more in terms of negotiation, and also interpersonal skills, and a broad understanding on international affairs and the ability to represent their country effectively. And the role for diplomat is to involve in working with foreign governments and international organizations and other stakeholders to advance their nation's interests. So we can see that as a scientist and a diplomat, we can see the difference. And I will go on further to explain what is science. Basically, science is a different nature compared to a diplomacy, because scientific values of rationality looks into rationality, transparency, and universality are the same in the world over. And scientific values underpin good governance and so build trust among nations. And science provides a non-ideological environment for free exchange of ideas, regardless of national, cultural, national, or religious backgrounds. Because the main focus of science is on more in terms of universal, neutral, rational, transparent, and also non-ideological. And if we go to and if we look at diplomacy, it's quite different from science, whereby diplomacy is more looking at broadly described as the art and conducting the negotiations, agreements, and relation between two or more parties in a sensitive way. So this party could be anything from a husband and wife or between countries. So we can see that the nature of science and diplomacy is quite different. And diplomacy is basically the art of science and practice of conducting negotiation between nations. And how does science diplomacy is different? And I try to dig further in terms of how different is science and diplomacy. If you look at the time scale for action, for science, it's going to be a very time scale for action is very long. For example, like you are a scientist, you want to publish a paper, it will take years. For diplomacy, the time scale for action is very short. Sometimes you need to put together a briefing paper in just a couple hours. So basically, the time frame is short. In terms of availability of information, for science, in research, we need to rely a lot on information that is what is available. But for diplomacy, information is not always available and reliable. So you have to need to depends on your networks and also your entrepreneurial skill and in terms of your networking. And for experimentation, for science, the experimentation is essential. But for diplomacy experimentation is not an option. So basically, what is common between science and also diplomacy? We can see that the commonality between science and diplomacy is that it's in terms of analytical approach, the importance of trust, and also relationship. So this is basically the most important factors in terms of how to relate science and diplomacy. So in terms of science, we can see that science is a process of pursuing answers, whereby diplomacy is a process for dialogue and cooperation between countries and also citizens. So we can see that if we integrate both science and diplomacy, we can face the challenges and take every opportunity to advance humanity. So basically, there's a strong point in science and there's a strong point in diplomacy. So basically, science, diplomacy connects both strengths points. I will go further into because the concept of science really keep on evolving because of the landscape keep on changing. From the first that was science diplomacy that was published by Royal Society in 2010. So we can see that the concept of science diplomacy keep on evolving, and because firstly is because of the shifting of global landscape, because of geopolitical tensions, because of rapid technological advances, for example, like AI and artificial intelligence and big data, competition over shared resources, and also growing focus on national security. So basically, because right now we used to go from globalization, right now the landscape is changing into deglobalizations. And also, secondly, is the persistent disparities. We can see that there are inequities in research capacity in terms of funding and access to knowledge between countries. Some countries have a very high share in terms of R&D, and some countries very low. And we can also see that there's also shifting culture of science, more building on academic freedom, more in terms of open science and also research integrity. And we can see also there's new actors in terms of science diplomacy. We can see that new actors coming in from subnational actors, for example, like cities and also regional authority. And we can see also some non-state actors, for example, like multinational corporations, the philanthropy, and also civil society. So basically, my lecture further will focus on what is the role of the new actors, especially the corporations, the private sector and corporations. If we look at the main actors in science diplomacy, he was took by from a European framework for science diplomacy. If we look at the main actors from science diplomacy, we can see that the main actors are basically the diplomats, the foreign ministries, and also diplomatic missions. And we can see there's also scientific in the orange. In the orange color, scientific and also scientific organization, whose work has an international dimension. And we also have governmental bodies and also international organizations, for example, like the national ministries, the European institution, and also UN agencies, and also UN bodies. And we also have other actors, for example, like the training providers, diplomatic academies, and also universities, and also private companies. And we have also NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and so networks for science diplomacy. And we have also organizations focusing on policy advice. For example, like we have INSA, International Network for Government Science Advice, and also ASEF, and also IPCC. So basically, the diplomacy is increasingly influenced, sometimes even driven by non-state actors. So non-state actors can comprise, for example, like NGOs, philanthropic organization, academic institution, and private sector entities. So in this, you can look at the recently published by AAAS and also Royal Society. They published a report on science diplomacy 15 years on. You can download this report and have a look. Science diplomacy in era of disruption. So in this report, it's identified that science diplomacy is increasingly used by non-state actors. Those using science diplomacy as a tool to achieve their national and also international objectives are typically, but not exclusively, diplomats representing their government. So basically, there's a new player, mostly because of they are they are not representing country, but they are representing their personal or companies itself. So basically, in recent years, there has been an increase in non-state actors, particularly from global technology companies, using science diplomacy to conduct their own equivalent or statecraft in support of their company's objective, which may be distinct from those of a national government. So basically, the companies are more representing their company's interest rather than the national interest. So this basically there's some conflict in terms of that. And why the role of the non-state is very very influential? Because for example, like the 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 non-state actors, for example, like the companies, they are they are very big. For example, you can look at the graph. These are some basically top companies in terms of revenues. You can see, for instance, if Microsoft and Apple were countries, they would be among the richest in the world. So basically, they are in terms of their resources, they are sometimes they are bigger than countries itself. So basically, they have in terms of asset, they have vast assets, and also because in terms of R&D, they spend a lot of R&D in terms of company itself. For example, you can see in this slide the most profitable company in 2024 in terms of energy, in terms of energy sector, in terms of technology, in terms of finance, healthcare. So basically, if you combine all these companies, they be bigger. Some is bigger than some of the states compared to other countries. And we can see that the biggest corporation, for example, like OpenAI, they have a very biggest private technology deals, more than 40 billions in April 2025. So basically, the amount of resources and capacity for these companies is very huge. And if you look at some of the most profitable unicorns, we can see that unicorns are called privately held startup with valuation exceeding 1 billion. So we can see that in terms of companies that is considered as unicorn, is very huge in terms of funding. For example, like SpaceX, 200 billion, ByteDance, 225 billions, OpenAI, and the other companies. So what is the impact of the non-state actors? We can see that because of the greater influence of the non-state actors, the power of the industry, some countries have started to opening diplomatic premises close to the industrial headquarters. For example, like Silicon Valley, some countries have started to move their even their embassy to the Silicon Valley. Followed by, for example, like Denmark, the EU office in Silicon Valley, California, countries increasing their engagement with the technology sector through California councils and the newly appointed envoy on technology to the ASEAN Secretary General. So basically, the increasing global influence of industry has made the international trade negotiation and the role of science within them even more complex and also ambiguous. And the other impact of the non-state actors is because because the increased role of the private sector has resulted in cases where companies have developed essentially diplomatic relationship, including conversation about emerging technology with foreign governments without the inclusion of national diplomats. So for example, like Microsoft, they have teams around the world focusing on engaging with the UN and also the EU and the international system at large based across New York, Geneva, Paris, Brussels, and so Washington. So basically, they have a dedicated team looking at this negotiating with the negotiating role, and they are not representing countries. And the other thing is that the private sector is now a major funder for of fundamental and also applied science efforts in many countries. Right now, I will go into the role of MITE and how MITE could operationalize in terms of the role of science diplomacy. Just an intro. MITE is basically a partnership technology think tank established in 1993 to undertake foresight and also future studies. It's basically a government agency at present under the purview of the Ministry of Science, Energy and Innovation System. So basically, what is our mandate? Our mandate is looking at 4 activities, looking at the foresight or the future studies. We also nurture and invest in build in terms of technological capabilities, and we do strategic advice to the government and also industry, and we also provide a platform for technology and also industry clusters. So basically, what we have is we don't have shareholders, but we have members. So most of our the corporate private sectors is members of MITE. We have 2 lead members, which is the Petronas and also Tenaga Nasional. And so, but basically, this member provide networks and also global linkages for members to capitalize on their synergistic partnership. And also so basically, we perform analysis on technology industry and also business opportunities. So basically, these are our members and also network partners. And what we look at in terms of technology industry, we look at in terms of manufacturing, services, and also in terms of others. So basically, these are some of the sectors that we are looking at. We do continuously review or anticipate issues on the need of industrial growth, focus on emphasis on MITE, and also the differentiation depending on the take and attention given by the government and so business. We also do technology foresight, looking ahead 10 to 20 years, looking at some of the new and emerging technology, for example, nanotechnology, advanced material, solar, electronics, pharmaceutical, composite, sensor technology, photonics, MEMS, herbal, and also green chemicals. So when MITE was established more than 30 years ago, the first sector that we look on is on the aerospace industry. At that time, the aerospace industry was a very infant industry. So, but what MITE basically did was that MITE bring all the players together, and we bring all the key stakeholders from the government and from the industry in order to develop the aerospace industry. What we did is basically we call all the key stakeholders and to identify what should our aerospace industry be in the next 30 years. So basically, we come up with a national aerospace blueprint, and the national aerospace identify what is the focus area for the aerospace industry, so that in terms of the foreign investors will know what is the plan for the government for the next 30 years. Other than that, we also look at in terms of the rail industries, in terms of the telecommunication industries, and also some of the automotive industries. So what MITE is basically is we work in the background. It's like we are the nation which is preparing what is the next development for the country in terms of, and we also look forward. use foresight as a methodology to look forward for in terms of where should the country focus and prioritize for the next 10 to 20 years. And what we have been doing. We have done foresight and future studies. We also engage with the public sector and also the private sector in terms of how to utilize foresight as a process, and how to institutionalize foresight into the organizations. For example, like Petronas, how we develop so that Petronas can institutionalize the process in their departments. And also we also identify some, for example, like when we do our study, we also always include foresight as foresight and also scenario planning as one of the key elements. We also do a strategic advice to the government and industry, looking at for example, like the high-tech merchandise export. Just a few days last week, we have a event on the high-tech export. In fact, we announced that Malaysia still remain top 10 in terms of high-tech merchandise export. We also do some studies on behalf of the government, looking at some, for example, like on the sharing economy, looking at the strategic action, looking at the smart city outlook. We look at even at federal level and also at the state level. And what we do is also we provide platform for technology and industry clusters. We engage, for example, with the platform, for example, like the Global Innovation Summit, the STS Forum in Kyoto, and also some of the, for example, like also business platform in terms of specific technology, for example, in nuclear technology. And what we do is, so we have also platform for technology and discussion into state. We go into state, every state, for example, in Malacca, in Perak, in also Johor, and also Sarawak, and also Sabah. So these are some of the platform for technology industry clusters that we have done. For example, that Lima. In fact, next month there's going to be the 17th Langkawi International Maritime and Space Exhibition, and Mike, we will be having a pavilion in there, and also we'll be announcing a few. We will be listing a few technology reports. We'll be launching four technology reports. One is on the advanced air mobility, on the aerospace innovation technology report, on the space industry report, and also on shipbuilding and ship repair industry. And also we also nurture and also invest to build technology capabilities. Under Mike, we have one company we are looking at called Venture Tech, that is looking at building startup, investing in companies, and also investing in companies. And also we have also some programs that I will explain later. So basically, what Mike did is basically what we look in terms of technology ecosystem, looking at what we call first funding, infrastructure, regulatory, skills, and also technology. So this is by design and not by chance. So for every technology industry that we will be looking at this 5 elements in terms of funding, infrastructure, regulation, skills, and strategy. These are basically some of the pain point for the industries, and for example, like funding, in terms of and also in terms of regulations. And what we do also in terms of science technology is in terms of international collaboration. We do multilateral, for example, with the UN agencies, the FCC, and we also have specific programs bilateral with countries. Our international collaboration program looking at industrial development, technology development, and also human capital program. So what we did is basically a match funding between our government and also, for example, like the Mike Tubita Grand Challenge, the Malaysian government and also the Turkey government come together in terms of joint funding. So the joint funding will we identify what are the areas in terms of you want to look for. For example, like the key institution looking at the in Turkey is Tubita. In Spain, we have Malaysian Spain Innovation Program. The agency that looking to that is CBTI, and in Indonesia we have Indonesian Grand Challenge, and the industry that the agency that is looking at is BRIN, and we are also looking at the Malaysian South Grand Challenge. So basically, these are a joint funding program. This joint funding program is based on what we have experienced before. So basically, it's a syndicated funding model between Mike and also the international funder. So basically, it's a joint funding, and also we include in terms of, for example, like in Malaysia, the companies and also the university has to work together, and also in terms of the international funder is also have to come up with from the universities and also from the corporate sector. So this joint project will come back together, and I will explain further. So these are based on Newton Ongko Omar Fund. It's a Newton Fund that we did more than 10 years ago with UK. So basically, we doing that. We took that model of the Newton Ongko Omar Fund and to try to have more in terms of global cooperation between countries, other countries, for example, in Turkey, in Spain, and also. So basically, this is some of the output from the Newton Ongko Fund. We can see that some of the outcome from the Newton Ongko Fund. And if I want to go further, for example, like just to give example, for example, like the Mike Tubita Grand Challenge that we did. The collaborator, we have one from Turkey, from the universities, one from the company from Turkey, and one company from Malaysia, and one university from Malaysia. We'll be working together. So they have been working on, for example, like the one project is on smart nanocrystal that enable light emitting diode lightning for sustainable control environment agriculture. So basically, they are working with Xiamen University Malaysia, and also the company is Kairos Agriculture. And the other project that we are looking at is the battery assisted technology for wearable device in healthcare monitoring and also system during pandemic or COVID. So so we have the partner from our University in Malaya and also Infinex companies in Malaysia. So also collaborating with the university in Turkey, Ismail, and also the company in Turkey. So these are basically some of the model in terms of joint collaboration and joint funding program. And these are some examples. For example, like in the Mike Tubita Grand Challenge, we look into a few projects. For example, like on the development of web-based prototype nanomaterials, assessment for paint and coating textile industries. We have also some project on development of integrated biomanufacturing and also application of high-value products from sustainable agriculture waste resources. And also, we have some projects on AI-powered mitosis detection in the evaluation for breast cancer, and also a composite supercapacitor device together with UPM. So these are some So the yellow one is still an ongoing project, and the previous one is some of it is that already completed. And for example, like in the together with the Malaysian Spain innovative program, we're looking at the also same together with our research institute in Malaysia and company in Malaysia working together with universities and also companies in Spain. For example, like development on aero gun is basically it's a paint it's a paint for heat insulation paint. So the project has been completed, and also the project sector right now they are in discussion with our local Syarikat Perumahan Negara. It is basically housing corporation to use the heat insulation, the paint developed by this consortium on their house for the Rumah Mesra Rakyat. So basically it's a housing project. So basically these are some of the outcome from the program that we have done. And the other one is on an innovative ecological low-cost solution for organic waste and wastewater treatment. And lastly, from the Malaysian Spain is on the potential use of recycled polymers and also national fibers for production of WPC composite for roof. So these are some of the example of the specific example on the some of the program that have been done. And basically, for example, like the joint funding program, we look at thematic areas. For example, like working with Tubita, we focus on thematic areas on food security, healthcare technology, energy, and also digital technology. So basically, how does these thematic areas come about is basically Mike and Tubita together we discuss and agree upon on how what should be the thematic areas. And for example, like with Malaysia, together with Spain, looking at thematic areas on sustainable city development, on K-economy, on advanced manufacturing, health, electronics, aerospace, and also smart agriculture. And with Indonesia, our collaborator is BRIEF. The thematic areas that we're looking at on natural products, natural product medicine, agriculture, on local genetics, resources and mechanization, vaccine process, and also technological developments. So in terms of future programs, we will be calling a new challenge or Malaysian Turkey Grand Challenge. So this is going to be another round of a Grand Challenge, and also we will be working with South Korea also on the Grand Challenge. So these are some of the examples, international collaboration in terms of how that might can operationalize international collaboration. And this is one recent projects that we are working on is together with UK, with the foreign government, Commonwealth and the Government Office together with UK. What we are looking at in terms of growth partnership, looking at AI especially. So basically, what we want to do is looking at how can together we can looking at the AI and how we can support in terms of growth for the AI development for the AI technology. So basically, we'll be looking at the current state of AI ecosystem in UK and also Malaysia, and how we can work together in terms of project and how we could collaborate together and in terms of looking at AI. So for example, like in Malaysia, most of the AI is looking on sectors, for example, on agriculture, forestry, medical and healthcare, and also smart cities, and also transportation, and also education. So basically, we'll be doing this engagement together with UK universities and also UK private sectors. So these are some of the projects that we'll be going on looking at. And lastly, for key takeaways, I can see that science, because of the changing landscape and also because of the significant challenges, science diplomacy is needed more than ever, and also it's a renewed framework to ensure continued utility. So basically, secondly, we can see that science diplomacy is increasingly used by non-state actors, especially from the corporate sector. We can see why, because they are getting some of the corporate sector is becoming bigger and bigger, and even bigger for some nations. And lastly, some key takeaways is that can be as a model for science diplomacy at work, and we hope that we could together work with ASEF and also ASEF members in terms of how we want to expand the international collaboration in terms of science diplomacy. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sakwan, for that introduction. It's very interesting to learn both about the general approach of private sector to these types of collaborations in science diplomacy, but then also what MITE is doing, I think, across a number of different countries, but also different thematic areas to really further science diplomacy in this field. So thank you very much for that introduction. With that introduction in place, I am going to let's see here. I'm going to go back to our presentation real quick, and we're going to introduce our second segment of today, which is our panel discussion. And with us for this, I will ask Mr. Sakwan to stay with us as I introduce our other speakers to the floor. So we were expecting one of the speakers to join us today, Professor Ahmad Ibrahim from the UCSI University, but due to last-minute scheduling, he could not join us, but we still have some other great panelists with us today to share their insights on the role of business and private sectors in Malaysia. So first off, allow me to introduce Mr. Asine Rahim, who is a researcher at Selangor Climate Adaptation Center, as well as a consultant at the World Bank. Asni is a climate adaptation and water resilience strategist with extensive experience spanning national policy initiatives, international organizations like the World Bank, and state institution, the Selangor Climate Adaptation Center, as I mentioned, as well. Her work specifically focuses on bridging the worlds of science, governance, and businesses. So great to have her here today for our final session on Malaysia, and turning these complex interlinks and the climate between on water challenges into practical, scalable solutions for resilience and sustainable development. And with a deep commitment to making science accessible and diplomacy inclusive, she advocates for strategic partnerships that empower businesses, communities, governments to co-create a more resilient future. So thank you so much for being here with us for this panel. Second, and our final panelist for today, last but not least, we have Professor Sakri Abdul Hamid, who is the chairman of the Business Council on Sustainable Development of Malaysia, as part of the national chapter of the World Business on Sustainable Development, as the WBCSD, and also the founding chair of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network and the Malaysia chapter. Professor Sakri is one of Malaysia's most distinguished science diplomacy and sustainability advocates, as he has served as science advisor to the Prime Minister of Malaysia, and also was the founding chair of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or IPBES for short. He was also a member of the UN Secretary General's Scientific Advisory Board and is the founding director of the International Institute of Science, Diplomacy and Sustainability at the UCSI University. Professor Sakri has played a key role in numerous global and national science and sustainability initiatives, including co-chairing the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment and leading the Malaysian delegation to several UN biodiversity and climate platforms. Beyond this, he's also the chairman of Actuary Advisory and Malaysia's science advisor for the Campaign for Nature 30x30. With that, I have introduced to you our lovely panelists for today. I thank them for being here with us. And I would like to take on the role now, shifting from kind of facilitator of this session to a moderator of this panel discussion. And go into some questions immediately as we're looking forward to hear more about the insights from our panelists today. So starting off, I would like to hear from all panelists on my first question as I take the floor to ask a couple of questions before we open up to the questions from our participants. I already see a couple in the chat here in the Q&A function, so feel free to post some more questions or, as I mentioned, upvote those that you think should be prioritized during our talk today. So perhaps I can invite Mr. Sakwan to start off answering these questions, and then we can go to Ms. Asni and then Professor Sakri to give their insights as well. But from your perspective, Mr. Sakwan, starting off, how can the private sector best collaborate with academia and government? So the two sessions that were before this as well, to strengthen science and technology diplomacy, and specifically the ecosystem. And I would invite you to share your thoughts here.
All right, thank you, Linia. When MIC was established way back in 1992, the former Prime Minister of Malaysia encouraged the concept of what we call the Malaysian Incorporated, whereby private sector can collaborate with the academia and also the government. This was the spirit of MIC, basically the partnership together from the industry and also from the government. And under the MIC, there's also an organization called the Aerospace Malaysia Innovation Center, what we call AMIC. It was formed basically in 2010 and 2011 as an industry-led research center as part of Malaysia's strategy to foster Malaysian aerospace industry competitiveness. So basically, the core business of AMIC is to undertake collaborative research and also technology project in collaboration with the industries and the universities in for example, in aerospace sector. This is a model jointly funded by, this is also jointly funded from the government and also industry. And AMIC is spearheaded by founding lead members, namely Airbus, Rolls-Royce, CRM, and also Mara, and also MIC. So basically, a significant future of AMIC is that the R&D conducted by the university consortium will encourage local industry to participate and also based on its research pursuit on industry needs. And also AMIC is also able to train local talent and with the courses at the master's and PhD levels in the field of aerospace technology. So basically, these are some examples how the private sector can collaborate with academia and MIC. And also under MIC, there's also under one organization called which I mentioned earlier on called Venture Tech. Venture Tech is basically it's an investment company established by the government of Malaysia way back in 2010 with a national mandate to encourage the participation of local Malaysian companies in high value added and also high technology industries. A key mainstay that will drive Malaysia into the sustainable and high growth economy. So basically, Venture Tech assumes as a catalytic role to assist industries and also nation in terms of transformation, development, and also advancing capability of local technology-based companies. So these are some of the examples that how the private sector can collaborate with academia and also the government.
Thank you very much for that insight. It's interesting to see how Malaysia is really investing in this field, and both in terms of the private sector, but then also from the support from the government as national initiatives. So thank you very much for that. Ms. Asnia, can I ask you to comment on this question as well?
Okay, so I'm going to leverage on my experience with climate and water. So in the most basic, Malaysia is rich with natural resources, especially water. This on its own gives us the leverage in decades to come when the world starts talking about the global water crisis. So utilizing this grounded science-based thinking, I see three powerful ways for the private sector to collaborate with academics and the government. First, we need to start co-designing innovation. Businesses, researchers, and policymakers must come together in the early stage of innovation, not merely at the end. For instance, in water management, companies developing smart water technologies are more successful when the R&D are grounded in overcoming government challenges, commercial interests, and also community realities. We have public institutions like Naharim eager to commercialize their innovation like the rainwater harvesting, but there are hurdles. So collaboration between government, academia, and private sector should not be about competition, but it has to be based on co-designship. So my second point is about making scientific knowledge more accessible and useful. Science should not be treated as a priesthood. It must be demystified, made relatable and accessible, not only to policymakers, but also to private sector. So we need data, we need structured knowledge exchange platforms like adaptation hubs that crosses the multi-level governance challenges. One example is, of course, the Selangor Climate Adaptation Center, allowing for this kind of translation, making it easier for communities and also businesses to engage with government. Third is, of course, practical pilot projects. Collaboration must go beyond MOUs. Private sector investments can be channeled into pilots with academic and also government partners to test scalable solutions, especially in challenges relating to environment, adaptation, which is very complex, water security, and also resilient infrastructure. More broadly, acknowledging that traditional global frameworks place accountability mainly on nation states, but successful science and technology diplomacy requires technological tailored implementation strategies that fully involve people and the private sector. Well, in short, collaboration must evolve from transactional to transformational, aligned around building resilience, sustainability, and shared societal value. The 3 Ps of people, planet, and prosperity that goes beyond profit. So, yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for that. And I love the finalizing on the 3 Ps. It's easy to remember in that sense. And I really appreciate the sense of bringing everyone involved, as I mentioned, and how everyone's perspective can really help contribute. And as you mentioned, perhaps prevent these challenges that can occur throughout the process. So thank you very much for that. Last but not least, Professor Sakri, would you like to share your insights on how the private sector can collaborate with academia and government, also considering your multiple hats here, where you could come from many different aspects as well?
Thank you. I think we have to look at it from different perspectives. With the bigger companies in Malaysia, like Sandabi and the like, this collaboration is quite easily done because the private sector has its own research houses, and they can easily collaborate with academia and also the government. But I'm more concerned with the smaller companies, the SMEs in Malaysia. Let me relate to you one anecdote which I experienced more than 10 years ago when I was science advisor to the Malaysian Prime Minister. I was given a pot of money, nearly 80 million ringgit from the government to initiate a collaboration between academia, government, and the private sector. But that project never really took off the ground well. You know why? Because this combination of some of the corporate people and the academia, at the end of some meetings, the academia prevailed because some of them are vice chancellor of universities, and they have a bigger gift of the gap. So in the end, they always won, But they are not really on solid ground because the private sector knows more about producing product. But because these high-flying academics were in that council, so most of the time we never got off the ground. So that's a lesson, I think, which Malaysia experienced, which is not uncommon with the other developing countries in this region or elsewhere. But lately there are many models, and I think Zakwan mentioned about one about EMIC, This is the Aerospace Malaysia Innovation Center, where to start with, our members include Airbus, at one time Rolls-Royce, and academics in our universities and the government. So it's really on the basis of co-design, co-plan, and club of individuals. The hierarchy is more flat. So in that way, we are more successful. In fact, the aerospace industry in Malaysia is really coming up very well. Of course, we are supplying quite a number of those components to the airline aeroplane manufacturers. So the number is climbing. So what I'm saying here, that understanding, respect, and trustworthiness. Here again, I think Zakwan in his lecture mentioned that the need for trust among these partners is very important. Finally, of course, the government has to come in and to come in with the funding. And here again, in terms of research, Malaysia, maybe we have said that in the previous webinar, in terms of the percentage of the GDP, in terms of research, is barely 1%. And with that kind of numbers, you don't get too far compared to countries like South Korea, Japan, Germany, where they are in the region of 3% of their GDP. So those are some lessons learned. Just to sum up, I think we are trying our best. There are some progress lately, but early on, the experience has not been that inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Zachary. Yes, it's interesting to learn of these initiatives, that there is intention to bring these different sectors together, but perhaps there needs to be, as Ms. Asni also said, a tailored approach to ensure that all different sectors are included properly, and that we go for listening to understand and make sure that all sectors are involved properly. As we transition into some further questions, I would like to ask a couple of questions to our panelists individually, but we also have been posting some poll questions throughout this webinar that you as a participant can engage in and give your own perspective on. Currently, we have another one open, which asks what you think are the current main challenges that businesses may face when they are engaging in science diplomacy, and you have a couple of alternatives here. So we'll leave the question open for a little bit, and we're excited to see what you have to say about this throughout as well. But as we go on, I see that we still have we have more questions also coming in the Q&A, and don't worry, I won't forget about you. I'm making some marks on which ones we should cover, but allow me to ask a couple of questions directly to our panelists before then. And what I would like to ask Ms. Asni first question to you. You talk about your experience with specifically climate and, as you say, water as well, but given your general experience in the government sector, what policies and initiatives are being deployed currently, or perhaps that you think should be deployed to better integrate businesses into national science and technology diplomacy agendas?
Thank you for that question, Nalia. Now, several key areas need emphasis. One, embed private sector participation into existing national frameworks. We need to move beyond ad hoc engagements. It should be embedded in the current development of National Adaptation Plan, SCI blueprints, and of course, formulating a climate diplomacy strategies. This applies in thematic areas like climate resilience and water. There are complex issues that need new actors in mobilizing innovative solutions and creative financing. Sometimes that it goes beyond existing models, but at the same time, existing issues relating to environment and land use are also contributed by industries and corporations, where current national frameworks have started to be more participatory with experts, academia, and also civil societies, but minimal platforms involve industries and corporations. Shifting from government and society to absorb socialized costs of our development to that it is everyone's responsibility is should start with ESG, for instance. And then many private actors find science too technical and difficult and detached from business realities. So government reports, science reports are too long, too brain frying for a lot of people. We're not asking for these to be dumbed down, but made more direct, easier to understand and draw up clearly, and identify what are the gaps and impacts are. So we have to explain, if anything were to be explained in a more complicated way, maybe we don't really understand the science enough. Policies, on the other hand, should incentivize innovation-driven PPPs or public-private partnerships and ensure scientific research is made business-ready. Malaysia is already doing a good job in this, as demonstrated by what Zakon has shared earlier. But this needs ownership and commitment from all parties. And it doesn't have to be high tech. It has to be something that solves daily problems like flood and drought, water stress. So making existing national platforms more efficient, agile, and adaptive, it goes beyond current procurement models, where businesses and academia and governments come together. I would like to share my experience in the public sector. We are stretched thin. The current governance model is challenging. Everywhere I go, be it at federal level or subnational level, now with State of Selangor, lacking capacity and budget constraints are the main issues. I once asked an ex-deputy minister if the perception and stigma of the laziness with government officials is true. So he said that challenges are threefold. The issues are getting more complex. You have the same number of people working on these things, but you have to respond much faster. And let me ask you, what would happen if you keep pouring more water in a cup that's already full? So to make these platforms more agile and adaptive, it needs a transformative strategy that is truly based on what government has already included in development agenda, which is the whole nation approach. So we don't need to create more platforms. We just need a more efficient one that adapts to existing challenges. Where there's too much water, we need a bigger bucket, not necessarily more cups. So last pointer, we need to start recognizing the SMEs and also industry and business leadership. I feel that environmental issues, especially where SMEs' livelihood are truly affected, is their main concern. We need to engage them in a language that they relate to. Corporate jargons and commercial interests are not something that public officials and researchers are accustomed to. So we need to learn how to navigate this. Recognizing efforts through the current ESG reporting, soft lands, how public policy can be made more agile and adaptive. The SMEs can utilize their own agency and form alliances, but we need to welcome them and develop a kind of national registries to welcome their participation. This has to come with incentives and also year-long engagement. So I would stop there because I think I'm turning this into my own lecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And no worries about talking about this for a longer time. We have still a lot of time left of this session, and it's very interesting to learn. And of course, we appreciate you and our other panelists for coming and sharing your perspective on these matters as well. I see that there is, again, a want to do things, but question of who should adapt to who is maybe a question here, or whether governments should be incentivized by businesses and by the civil society on how to adjust their strategies to fit the needs and wants of the population, or whether or not it's more of a top-down perspective, as you say, to see what is currently available in the government structure and to see how you can utilize those aspects for the greater good and for the perspectives here. Thank you very much for that. And I have some follow-up questions that I will pose for you perhaps later as we go along as well. But before we go for that, I would like to invite Mr. Sakri to answer one of my questions here as well. From your experience, what are some key challenges and opportunities for businesses who are already engaging in scientific research and innovation collaboration? So Ms. Asni said that it might be difficult and they find science a bit difficult, but what are the challenges here that you see for those who are already engaged on the topic?
Thank you for that relevant question. I think it's more of reaching out. In the sense, the private sector, in particular the smaller companies, need to reach out, and also government or academia needs to meet them halfway and strike a dialogue among people, and that too has to gravitate into making some targets that are useful. What I mean by that is targets of what kind of products that you want to get out from the so-called collaboration. Most of the time, again, academia, they can be brilliant researchers, but their research product, their publication may not be relevant to the private sector, and that is the problem. Those publication or findings may be good to get the academic professorial appointment, but in terms of relevance, in terms of applicability, that's one thing. I think Asni mentioned about her experience in the water sector. Here again in Malaysia, the water problem has not gone away, when in fact there's more collaboration between government, academia, and the private sector could be forged. That would be better. No, I was in India at one time attending a meeting, and my Indian colleagues were saying how advanced India is. And they are painting a good picture. But one colleague from the US was asking, one Professor Rao, I'm so impressed with the advances that you made, but how come we still couldn't drink from the tap, the water in New Delhi, So that kind of thing. And in Malaysia, you could find that sort of thing too, where the research output is not applicable to real life, And in that context, also, if I can go to a related subject, in terms of government has done quite well. Like here in this country, we have this National Council on Climate Change, chaired by the Prime Minister, and also the National Science Council, chaired by the Prime Minister himself. But those are very formal, These are good, but there should be other mechanism. And that mechanism we have tried recently in the form of a platform called Friends of Sustainable Malaysia. Awesome. And this is a dialogue which we convene every once in 2 months, and in which the leadership is taken up by ex-ministers who are apolitical, but very wise, and these people are the honest broker, bringing in all these different actors together and working out roadmaps or approaches to make Malaysia a more sustainable country. And in which dialogue in the form of science advice or even science diplomacy were discussed from time to time. So I think there should be more of that kind of setting in our country, in particular in developing country. And then to assure science is not something complicated, but something which is practical, which can be used by the citizen. And hence, that is why science diplomacy at the outset, the global level, is trying to solve pressing global problems like climate change or biodiversity loss or pollution. So these are real life problems. I'm not sure whether being in Singapore, you must know, a couple of years ago in Johor, the pollution of the Sungai Tingting in one of the small cities near Johor, that's out of ignorance of the private sector, not to pollute. In the end, school children were almost being poisoned to death, and that reflect the low level of understanding and awareness of our people. So science advice, science interaction through dialogue, I think needs to be enhanced. And hopefully, even at a non-formal level. The government can do what they like, as I said earlier, but democratization of science needs to be done big time nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The key takeaway here is to ensure that the science is practically implementable, possible to implement in practice. And on the line of the challenges, we asked the audience to let us know what they think are the current biggest challenges that businesses face in science diplomacy as a whole. And we see here that the main response here is to navigate the complex political and regulatory environments. So as Asli mentioned, that there might be some disconnect in understanding these frameworks, these documents that are put forward as well. But then we also have some answers of aligning, of course, the goals to national and international science policies, as well as building this trust. So we see also trust not only between different sectors, but trust in science in general has been a very big theme in science diplomacy in the last couple of years. And we see maybe a decrease in the trust in science. And we're now needing to see how we can bring that trust back into the field. So I think here that we see from the panelist perspectives as well that it takes all of the parties involved to ensure that we are on board with this. But in line with the challenges, as mentioned, I would like to hear from Mr. Sakwan as well from an industry perspective. So what are some of the barriers that companies do face when working with academia and government in the science diplomacy field, and what motivates companies to still participate and connect in these different efforts?
Okay, Helena, thank you for the question. So basically, the main what motivates companies is basically two, basically on market access and also access to funding. And like I mentioned, and in terms of some of the barriers, like I mentioned, we, for example, like we look at the first funding, infrastructure, regulatory skills, and these are basically the pain points that in terms of building ecosystem, these are some of the pain points for the industries and also for the government. So basically, the main challenge is, of course, funding. That is why Mike is focusing on joint collaboration and also match funding with countries, with other countries, because for example, like in Malaysia, we have limited resources. So basically, we need to join, collaborate, and also work with other countries in terms of building of our technology capabilities. And secondly, it is in terms of the barriers is in terms of the regulatory issues. For example, currently Mike is looking on the potential development of advanced air mobility as the leading edge of innovation in the aviation industry by introducing higher levels of automation and also new technological advancements. It offers significant benefits, for example, across industries, including enhanced healthcare delivery, improved logistic, remote access, and also streamlined transport in city centers. But yet it faces challenges. And mostly the challenges is because in terms of regulatory issues. So because some of this technology is too advanced, and our regulatory is still cannot cope in terms of the development of this technology. So what we did is that we need to engage with the key stakeholders, and in Malaysia we have a process we call sandboxing, basically in terms of testing the application for this technology, try to make a case study for this technology and try to test in certain areas. So we have been doing under MOSTI or Ministry of Science and Technology and Industry, we have an agency looking at this sandboxing, basically focusing on the regulatory issues. Some looking at, for example, like if you want to they will try to put some areas, for example, like if you want to test out the advanced aerial mobility or the drones, they will allocate some certain areas where we could test in terms of application, and also in terms of the relevance of this technology. So these are basically the two areas, the two main barriers, funding and also in terms of regulatory. And thirdly is in terms of the skills and the skill in terms of talent. Talent is I think in Malaysia we are right now we are focusing we have these issues. It's not in Malaysia also, but globally the talent issue is also a main concern in terms of looking at the right talent, because in Malaysia that we look at the supply and also demand in terms of the talents, and building on the talent we need, because right now the talents we need to produce more in terms of talent. For example, like we are facing challenges in terms of all the industries need this same kind of skill sets, and also but in terms of supply, the rate is going down in terms of some of the our young they in terms of they are not very interested in terms of science. In terms of STEM, so these are some of the areas that the government is currently encouraging to encourage more the young students to involve in STEM education especially. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It's interesting to see what motivates different businesses to involve in this. And of course, mine here is an example, but I'm sure that this can be expanded also to other companies as well. We're posting another question in the poll for anyone who is interested in answering, and we're asking you specifically what you think are the most effective ways of integrating science diplomacy into industry's operations. So please give us your input here. And I see also that Miss Asni would like to comment here, so I'll give you the floor before we go into some questions from the participants.
I thought I can answer that question. Someone posted to me, the anonymous.
Yes, you can, of course, also, yes.
Yes. So I'm glad that this person picked up the transformational collaboration. But basically, if you look at ESG, where Prof. Zachary already mentioned earlier, his concern is for the SMEs. Right now, ESG is not being regulated as such. It's still in a national framework. But if we can encourage state governments to come together and start engaging, empowering state governments so that they would know what kind of problems that the businesses around their state is facing, it would be a start. And transformational, like, adaptation, transformative adaptation, it requires for government to change to do. Right now, it is federal to maybe big corporations, but to include SMEs, we need to empower different kind of actors, maybe at state level or even local governments. That in itself is transformation. Another transformation would require maybe financing. This finance, maybe we have to really ask ourselves, how much do we actually need to move science and technology to solve our problem? We're talking about finance as though it is such a difficult thing to crack, but it's not. Well, I'm not going to say we need to borrow, but to incentivize government to look beyond existing mechanism, we need to really consider how much is needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Asni. I see Prof. Zachary also wants to give some input here as well. I hand the floor over to you.
Yeah, I want to continue on this aspect raised by Azmi, and that is about sustainability, which we haven't really deep dived today. I think in particular for those SMEs, they have to be very conscious of some of the issues today, which eventually would affect the way of doing business in the near future. And that includes, they need to be aware of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. They need to be aware of the impact of climate change. They need to be aware of renewable energy transition. They need to be aware of ESG rating and certification. So those are very real issues which many companies today would find quite not in the deep end, So they need to be aware of that. In particular, and like many governments of the world, Bursa Malaysia is introducing this ESG reporting platform for the large companies, the listed companies, that is already obligatory. But eventually, I think the smaller ones would have to be brought in also. And the fact that you'll see, I'm not sure whether Zakwan mentioned in his keynote, eventually the companies that adhere to sustainability standard, ESG and all that, would have a better chance of surviving in the future. So again, those questions need to be brought in, and I come back to the issue of this need for public engagement. And that public engagement, I need to mention again, cannot be political in that sense. It has to be apolitical, it has to be neutral, it has to be transparent, and then eventually we hope there will be a better buy-in. And that, again, I think, besides the current generation, we can touch on another aspect of the generational divide, the need for the younger generation, the need for the young people to be involved. So they are the ones who's going to inherit the planet, not people like me. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Zachary, and also for encouraging youth to get more involved and to take on the spots here and to still advocate for, the future for all of us, yourself included, of course, also. Thank you so much for those perspectives. I would like to continue with some questions now on the track with some questions from the panel. Participants to the panelists. We gathered those from the chat and would like to start off with a question to Mr. Sakwan from Ceres Salina in the Q&A. You mentioned during your presentation both some different organizations and companies that you work with, and also on some thematic areas in which might collaborate on different projects on. So Selina would like to know, Selina would like to know if you could expand upon some of the industries that might prioritize for collaboration and how they align with the different objectives related to science diplomacy. And building on that, we also have an anonymous question which aligns a bit to it. In line with these different priorities, how can one engage with MITE and explore potential collaboration opportunities?
All right, Lina, thank you very much for the question. I think in terms of, for example, like for joint, for international joint collaboration, what we did is that in terms of identifying the sectors that we need to focus on in terms of the grand challenges, what we did is basically we tried to for example, like we will negotiate with the partner, the key partner with the countries. For example, like in Turkey, the Tubita, we establish a committee together with them, and we try to negotiate in terms of what are the areas, priority areas for the countries, and we try to come in together so that we negotiate together so that we could agree what are the key areas that we want to focus on. Basically, these are basically based on negotiation and also discussion with the partner in terms of looking at the areas for the great challenges. And also, in terms of joint collaboration, for example, like we encourage if certain countries want to, because our in terms of the collaboration, we are quite open in terms of what are the countries that we want to collaborate in, and basically we would like, for example, like if members of ASEF could come in and also come and discussion with Mike in terms of how we could participate in terms of joint collaboration and also international funding. So we are looking forward for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it seems to be that there are many different opportunities for exchange between different organizations and a number of different thematic areas as well. And depends a bit on which type of organization and the goals of each collaboration opportunity. So thank you very much for that. Speaking of collaboration opportunities, I would like to go back to Ms. Asin for your impact here. You talked about the importance of co-designing different projects between businesses and academia and all of the different stakeholders. So we have a question here in the Q&A from Clementine Flack, who asks what type of collaborations are most impactful based off of your experience, if any come to mind. So what formats or perhaps which types of organizations and structures are the most effective to further science diplomacy?
Okay, in terms of, I'm not going to answer that on the basis of science diplomacy, yeah? But when we talk about co-designing anything, taking from the experience of preparing the concept note on National Adaptation Plan, something that involves private sector, especially for climate risk early on, would help the government to determine how it is impacting not just the people, the population, but also businesses. And this is evident from the December 2021 flood, where billions are lost. So co-designing is something that would involve strategies and implementation that the government feels is good for the country, but engage early on with private sector as well as civil societies. There are instances where on a smaller scale, for instance, like the SGP grants, small grant projects, anything that's less than $50,000 US, we can have that as well. So, but I would like to highlight that all these grants and collaboration, although it's co-designed, it's not easily accessible. So, a transformative way would be to allow, or if I can use Tan Sri Zakri's term just now, democratize the process, and for federal government to actually encourage more private sector to collaborate with either state government or ministries to have ready funds. One is started by quite a few years ago, the Ministry of CASA, Environment and Water, where we have Wakaf IE, or a set of funds to help communities. Co-designing would be should have been extended to involve private sector to do the CSR, for instance. Yeah.
Thank you very much here. So the key to successful collaborations is to engage everyone early. So not for it to be an afterthought, but consistent process as well. I find that very poignant and, of course, very important in this case. Thank you so much. So if we move back to Professor Zakri, we have a couple of questions in the chat for you, but the first I would like to ask is related to the objectives of science and technology diplomacy. So with the objectives of science diplomacy, which can be many in this case, how can one effectively balance long-term research priorities of academia and businesses, as well as short-term economic goals, perhaps within the private sector, but then also, of course, within other sectors as well? So how does one balance these different priorities?
First and foremost, one needs to appreciate the problems that we are facing today. On the global scale is, of course, the global challenges that we have expressed many times. Secondly, we must appreciate advances in science, technology, and innovation. SCI provides the key to solve some of those problems. So mastering that is very important. All around, and also appreciating that among the private sector. Fourth, I think, is to reflect that all these problems need to be brought together in the form of convening dialogues and all that. That's what science diplomacy is all about. It's interaction between two or more countries, or between two or more groups, not necessarily between countries. Even within a country, you can have a sort of science diplomacy, intra-national, and that is the excitement today. Not to say that science has not been involved in diplomacy. Again, Zakwan's good keynote earlier on. But today is how we are saying that science can accelerate to solve those problems. And even in our part of the world, there are many examples of that. One, of course, is the transboundary haze problem, which has not been perfectly solved through government-to-government interaction. So again, here, through diplomacy, science diplomacy can help out, in which groups, different actors or stakeholders can get together and try to provide the way forward. I'm saying here maybe groups between academic and their counterpart in the other country can converse, or also getting the involvement of the private sector to appreciate the pitfalls of open burning, for instance, or burning to open up for agriculture. All those need dialogue, and what better way than to have science diplomacy? Because science diplomacy eventually is to promote well-being, peace, and prosperity or in the words of Azmi, the stuff she mentioned about the three P's, right? People, planet, I would mention profit, but well-being, you know. So those needs to come together. Yeah, there's another question, right?
Yes, we do have another question. I think you bring in the perspective, as you mentioned, of ensuring that it's not only a conversation between countries, as you say, but between different actors within a country, and making sure that the translations and the understanding between them is just as important to ensure the advancement of science diplomacy. And I love the more holistic look on ensuring the well-being of people as well. But yes, we do have another question for Professor Sakwe, and then I'll go for one final question for Mr. Sakwan before I have a general question that I would like to end with all of our participants. But for Professor Sakwe, we have Licio Moy in the chat, who's asking about the balancing of science, of challenges and opportunities within science and technology diplomacy, and especially considering Malaysia's dynamic role. How does one balance these challenges and the opportunities in this field?
What one?
Yes, Professor Sakwe.
I think it's me.
Can you repeat that? Yeah.
No worries, no worries. We have a question from Licio Moy in the chat, who's asking regarding balancing formal diplomacy with science and technology diplomacy. So diplomacy in its stricter sense, as we've heard also described by Mr. Sakwan in the presentation, and science and technology diplomacy. This kind of interlink between the understanding of diplomacy, formal diplomacy in its sense, and how technology is introduced in it can present both challenges and opportunities. So how can one balance these between them?
Yes, that's a good question, but it's quite a basic question. One must realize that these two terms, diplomacy or the conventional diplomacy, is not in competition with science diplomacy. So diplomacy, which has been practiced by professional diplomats, particularly in the foreign service, in the foreign ministry, that is still ongoing, all right? What is intriguing is overlaying that with science diplomacy, where science can provide a lot of the underpinning for some of those issues, conflicting issues, you know. One example in science diplomacy is the cold continent of Antarctica. Antarctica at one time was a race towards mining, towards establishing defense, science, and all that. But the world gets smart, and to see that this cannot go on. In the first place, Antarctica would only be the purview of a number of advanced countries with advanced ship, equipment, and all that. So the world got together to see that Antarctica should be a zone of peace and a zone for research, you know, and not to pursue economic gains. So that's one example of how conventional diplomacy integrate with science diplomacy. The science diplomacy pointed that Antarctica is crucial to the well-being of the planet. Like even today, we see the iceberg breaking, you know, that's a danger to humankind. So the question is complementarity between conventional diplomacy and science diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I see here that there shouldn't be an issue here, that everything should be able to work very well together in that sense, and how science can really help contribute to the diplomatic field as well. we are showing the results of the poll here on the screen, but moving on from that, I want to ensure that we get as many questions as possible from the Q&A as well. So one final question that I would like to ask for Mr. Sakwan before I pose a general closing question to all of our panelists is from Mohammed Iqbal in the chat. So he writes that MITE operates through public-private partnerships and joint funding models to operationalize science diplomacy. So given that private actors increasingly wield an influence rivaling that of sovereign states, you also mentioned the scope in which the economies of states are now being rivaled by the bigger companies in the world. How can Malaysia here future-proof its science diplomacy ecosystem where it leverages its innovation capacity, but also prevents against corporate interests perhaps gaining too much power and influence?
Right. Elena, thank you for the question. I think the most important point is that most of our joint collaboration is still underpinned by G2G, or government to government. So basically what we did is that also we encourage from the private sector and also from the universities to collaborate together. But the underpinning of the government is still an important element in terms of that. So basically, it's secure in terms of if any or wrongdoing or something like that. So basically, the agency that for example, like in the case of in Malaysia, will be responsible for the private sector companies in Malaysia, and for example, for example in Turkey, the agency that involved is for example like Ciputa, they will be responsible for the private sector in Turkey. So basically, this close collaboration together will ensure that there's going to be a smooth in terms of what we can follow up, and also what in terms of in the future we can collaborate together.
Thank you very much for that answer. And we also just post our last poll question here in the chat. So speaking of the influence of industries and of the private sector, to what extent do you think that businesses are influencing policies today? You can give your reply there in the poll. But with that, we're coming towards the end of this section. I would like to ask one final question to all panelists, so perhaps starting then with Ms. Azmi. How do you, in 2 minutes perhaps, I'll give you max 2 minutes, can you pitch to us how and why companies or organizations from across countries in Asia and Europe, so perhaps those that are sitting here in this webinar and listening in, can and should collaborate with businesses in Malaysia? So what is the entry point for them, and why should they want to collaborate?
Well, I mean, I'm gonna base my pitch on environmental issues. They are equally exposed to the risk of environment and also climate. So that's a definite way of looking at it. So the platform is encouraging their participation through ESG because it's already there, and it's not regulated. Perhaps it's going to be soon. So the adoption is already affecting SMEs, because for SMEs who are vendors to corporations, they are affected, of course, and people, businesses who are applying for financing with the banks, with the pressure to adopt ESG. So this goes beyond reporting, actually. So because when you start reporting ESG, you need to understand your basic electricity consumption that translates into emission reduction, your water consumption and whatnot. That is one thing. But in order for them to be more involved with science, we need to speak to them in a more basic, and this is where I think, Tan Sri Zaki, forgive me, I'm going to say that scientists need to also acknowledge that a lot of real problems aren't scientific problems. They are non-science problems like geopolitics, governance, and economy. This is impacting everyone. And government needs to play a role in encouraging everybody, so civil societies and also business chambers and NGOs to be involved in this process. Is that 2 minutes, Linnea?
Perfectly on time. Thank you so much for that. And yes, Professor Sakri, I would like to give the floor to you to perhaps reply to Ms. Asni's comment, but then also generally answer how can different companies in Asia and Europe work with businesses in Malaysia?
All right, I will answer that, but I can't resist responding to Hasni when she said that the non-sciences are equally important. But I must say I agree with you. The non-sciences, the humanities are spot on. Just look at our corner of the world today. The geopolitics of the South China Sea. It's all about about conflict. It's about the superpowers and all that. And there's no issue in between. I would argue that it is a time for us to look at how science diplomacy can diffuse the situation in the region, where the superpowers and the smaller one or countries in ASEAN can work together, to develop a zone of peace. And again, I have to go back to the issue of Antarctica, the cold continent, how it become a zone of peace and neutrality. We can do the same for the South China Sea. The other one about how could Asia collaborate with Europe. I think ASEF, and this is a call to you. I think the time is right for us to look into this. We are having common problem, but the precept of science diplomacy is how do you achieve common interests? What we have here is common interests, peace and well-being for the world. When I say Stanley, because Europe itself is very aware about the potential and promise of science diplomacy. The recent release of the European Union roadmap on science diplomacy, I think was released in Paris about 1 month ago, is a good basis. And they are not only talking about Europe, they are also talking about interacting with the global south. And countries like us, in particular, ASEAN, welcome such a move. In fact, through our institute, we are trying to champion, we're trying to get the buy-in of people in this region to develop an ASEAN Center on Science Diplomacy, which then can collaborate through ASEF and EU on how science diplomacy could be a platform for peace and prosperity for the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sakri. And I think that gives us very good hopes for the future, as we see also, as you mentioned, with the initiatives from Europe and then the potential center in ASEAN as well. And of course, ASEF stands ready to help bridge the gap between the two regions if necessary. With that, I would also like to give the floor to Mr. Sakwan to comment on this question. How do you think that businesses in Asia and Europe should collaborate with Malaysia?
Yeah, I think, thank you, Lena. I think the most important point is that we have a common problem and we need to find a solution. And the solution is no one country can solve it. So we need to come together and solve it together as not as an individual country, but together we going to have to solve the problem. And in order to do that, we need firstly in terms of we need to establish what I mentioned before, the trust must be there in terms of coming together with a same problem and coming out with the offer some solution towards that. And in order to do that, we need to, for example, like a network in terms of and ASEF is a good platform in terms of networking and potential for other countries to collaborate together in terms of looking for finding the right solution and solving the problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that answer and for highlighting our role and potential or contribution to this field as well. It's very grateful. I'm just posting now the final results from our last poll, to which extent private sectors are influencing international science policies. And majority of the results say that it is to a great extent that we believe that private sector are already influencing it. Then the perspective on how much they should or should not, of course, has been topic of debate today, and also some of our questions that have been posed. But that I leave up to you to decide for yourself. With this, I would like to thank our panelists for all of their answers and their perspectives on today's topic. It's been really insightful to learn more about these different avenues for businesses to be active in the realm of science diplomacy, no matter the topic or themes that one can engage on. I think we can all agree that it all comes from working within different sectors within the country, scaling up sustainably, as Asni mentioned, with the co-created projects here, and ensuring that everyone is involved from the beginning to then work towards the common goals of building more sustainable and peaceful future for all. With that, I would like to just wrap up today's session and thank again our panelists for joining us. It's been a great pleasure of having you here today for our final session on the Malaysian science and technology diplomacy ecosystem. We're really grateful for all of those of you who attended today's session, for those of you who maybe attended previous sessions throughout these couple of weeks, and hopefully you have now gained better insights into the complex landscape of science diplomacy in Malaysia, the different stakeholders that are engaged, their different levels, their opportunities and challenges that they face in this intersection, and how we can strive for collaborations beyond the borders of Malaysia within these fields. We would like to thank again the International Institute for Science, Diplomacy and Sustainability at UCSI University, and of course the Malaysian Industry Government Group for Higher Technology, MITE, for helping us organize these workshops and for your great expertise and sharing of the perspectives of Malaysia on this topic. With this being the last session on Malaysia, we of course look forward to also the upcoming workshops on Kazakhstan, Thailand, and Indonesia. And with you on the screen currently is a QR code for you to be able to scan and sign up for either of those workshops, either the full set of 3 workshops focusing on government, business, and academia and research there as well, or any of those that interest you individually. You can also sign up to our mailing list to learn more about the science diplomacy opportunities that we offer here at ASEF and be up to date with any insights and information that we share there. As I mentioned in the introduction, we build this workshop series upon some of the findings from our Asia-Europe Science and Technology Diplomacy Report, for which we conducted the research last year. And on the screen currently, you can also scan the QR code to be able to access and read the full report. With that, thank you again for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists, to Mr. Sakwan for both coming as a panelist and for your great introduction to today's session. I wish all of you a good rest of your day or evening, depending on where you're signing in from. And we look forward to welcoming you in our upcoming workshops on Kazakhstan, Thailand, and Indonesia. Thank you so much and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.